through regulating international transfers in conventional weapons and increasing transparency in the arms trade, the ATT has a key role in ensuring the safety of communities that development can take place unimpeded by armed violence and conflict, reduce human suffering, and ultimately save lives. Throughout the negotiation of the ATT, states in Africa advocated for a strong treaty. For states, the first step towards realising the benefits of the ATT is to join the treaty and thereby become a state party. Such action must be accompanied by work on implementation of the treaty's obligations. Our discussions this morning will focus on the progress made so far on universalisation of the ATT in Africa. What have been the opportunities, challenges, and lessons learnt on the path to universalisation? And what support is available to those states seeking to join the treaty? Speaking on these matters is an impressive lineup of speakers, which includes Ambassador Lassana Giberi of Sierra Leone, who served as the president of the 7th Conference of States Parties to the ATT, Ms. Raluca Mirasan, acting co-director of Control Arms, Mr. Fahad Ahmed, legal advisor at the International Committee of the Red Cross, a person who's still in the process of joining and who hopefully will be able to join us is Mr. Lasconi Mungui Medi, Chief of Political and Legal Affairs at the Ministry of External Relations in Cameroon, and another Control Arms colleague, and that is Mr. Eugene Udine Galim, Chairperson of the Peace and Security Cluster at the African Union ECOSOC, and who's also the Executive Director of Cameroon Youth and Students Forum for Peace. Also participating in the discussion and providing much welcome updates on the progress of their respective states towards joining the ATT will be to my right, and the in-person element of this event, Lieutenant Colonel Ronald Kachupaga of Malawi. And we're also honoured to be joined by the Permanent Secretary of the Gambia, Her Excellency Rohi Bete. Let us get underway. I now have the pleasure of introducing Ambassador Giberi, who, after successfully serving as the president of last year's Conference of States Parties, is really a man who needs no introduction. Having led advocacy on ATT universalisation in 2021, and now is the current co-chair of the ATT Working Group on Treaty Universalisation, Ambassador Giberi is going to share his views on why it is important that African countries join the ATT, and his wealth of experience of the opportunities and challenges in this area of work. Ambassador Giberi, it's a pleasure to see you, and over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a greater pleasure to be here with you all, and thanks for the very flattering introduction. I see familiar faces. My good friend Raluca is here, and we slowed it out through my presidency. As you guys are extremely helpful, and I'm still very grateful for that. Thank you so much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, it is always a pleasure to be with you, and I'm particularly glad to be speaking today on universalization of the Arms Trade Treaty in Africa. I'm the former president of the treaty, but also I'm currently co-chair of the working group on treaty universalization. So I do have something to say about that. I don't have a lot. For those of you who've had me quite frequently on this and other forums, I don't have a lot of new information to share, but I do have some reflections to make on what we have done in the past and what is still possible to do in the future, and to shed light on the critical role of the treaty universalization for the effective implementation of the ATT. As you all know, the Arms Trade Treaty was adopted on the 2nd of April 2013. It is the first international treaty that aims to establish global standards for the international trade of conventional weapons and seeks to reduce the illicit trade in arms. The treaty's core objective is to contribute to reducing the suffering of millions of civilians who are affected by armed conflict and violence around the world. And I say this with some passion and a lot of experience coming from Sierra Leone, which experienced a truly devastating civil war for over a decade. So our commitment to the effective implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty derives from that, partly from that experience, but also from the experience of other countries in Africa. It was that experience that led us to assume the presidency of the 7th Conference of State Parties to the treaty in August 2020. So we had a very definite agenda when we took on that role. It wasn't just a fortuitous thing. It wasn't just by chance. It wasn't just because we wanted the prestige of heading the conference, but we had very specific goals in mind, derived, born out of our own experience and the experience of our brothers and sisters across Africa, the continent that I presume to speak on behalf. Many countries in Africa, like mine, have suffered devastating loss of life, heinous injuries on this vast scale, and widespread rape, all as a result of the inadequate regulation of international arms exports. Additionally, besides the direct consequences caused by unchecked conventional weapons trade, the indirect consequences, less immediately obvious, are also quite catastrophic. Countries experiencing conflict or in conflict aftermaths find themselves having to utilize their very scarce resources that are desperately needed for basic public service infrastructure to address the results of conflict, including on health costs, on military expenditures, and all related costs deriving from that conflict. Currently, we are still in Sierra Leone grappling with reparations for victims who were amputated during the war, and we still don't have enough resources to take care of those adequately. It's a massive problem, massive social problem. It is for this reason that I made the decision during my presidency to focus on strengthening efforts to eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons, and strengthening the ATT through increased membership. We very early on thought that this is critical to the relevance of the treaty to make more members join. And we made particularly conscious efforts in our region in Africa, and beginning, of course, with West Africa. As you know, in West Africa, many states have joined, only one, but that one too, we worked hard and on the verge. I'm really pleased to have the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Defense of the Gambia here. We had the defense minister here, and my sister, she dropped by to see me yesterday. I'm very pleased to see you, and I hope we will complete the process with your assistance, of course, of the Gambia acceding to the treaty and ratifying it. And the political will is there. They are really very keen on being a part of this community. I thank you for coming. Throughout my mandate as president of the CSP7, and now as co-chair of the working group on treaty universalization, I've learned that the reasons for non-participation of countries in the treaty are many and various, and are often context-specific. But though they are context-specific, there are commonalities. Last year, while speaking directly with countries experiencing concerning their progress towards joining the ATT, one common theme emerged, and that theme is the need for cooperation and assistance. It was a theme that emerged across the board. I mean, countries in Africa, countries in Latin America, countries in other parts of the world, the Middle East and other places. So this wasn't just confined to countries in Africa that we met, even countries in Europe. The same concerns were expressed by Turkey, for example. We believe that achieving the objectives of the ATT requires ensuring that all states parties have the necessary resources to effectively implement the treaty. It is one thing to get people to sign up, but it is another to make sure that the treaty is effectively implemented. There are obligations with respect to being a member, reporting obligations, but also you have to make sure that some of what you sign up to are actually implemented. And this can serve as an example to other states who are also considering joining, or who may not be considering joining, but who will see the example of effective implementation as something to emulate. So I'm grateful to those six parties serving on the voluntary trust fund committee and those that provide financial assistance to this important multilateral fund in support of the treaty's universalization and implementation. In addition to that core issue, some countries express reservations about joining the treaty on the following grounds, and I'll list them one by one. And this came across, again, very broadly. Number one, some countries said, look, we live in volatile neighborhoods, and the security concerns posed by adjacent countries that have not yet joined the treaty or are refusing to join prevents us also from joining, because this will be self-defeating to do. There are also, number two, bureaucratic hurdles, particularly changing in the composition of the legislature and key executive offices, lack of know-how to access resources of the ATT framework, delaying the domestic ratification process. Yesterday, I met with a delegate from Haiti, and we had some conversation around the capacity of their parliament, which doesn't currently, is not constituted. So that's a major problem, even discussing the treaty in any meaningful way within government. The Gambia just had their parliamentary elections, and the new members, I think around 2/3 of the members are completely new. So they will need to be socialized and brought on board with what the Armed Trade Treaty really represents in order for them to meaningfully push it through government. Those are some of the hurdles. I mean, in every election cycle, personnel changes and especially Africa can be a major setback. But we saw that also in the Philippines. But now they've gone through that. There was a view which at every opportunity I try to debunk during my meetings with member states. That view was that the treaty will impair the ability to acquire arms for legitimate national defense purposes. This view is quite widespread, but it's not true, actually. It is true, it could be true maybe in very exceptional circumstances. I met a country that is under an arms embargo, a UN Security Council arms embargo, and that country was quite found it's self-defeating for them to sign up to a treaty that calls for transparency. When to be able to arm themselves, they have to engage in smuggling weapons or to acquire weapons in ways that are not quite transparent. And I saw that point, but there are not very many countries under an arms embargo. An arms embargo was out for a reason. that can actually underpin the principles of the ATT. In addition to the above, there are the challenges, of course, compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic, which will have a long-term socio-economic and political impact on many countries. The ATT requires each state party to regulate the international trade in conventional arms taking place under its jurisdiction and to take measures to prevent their diversion to the illicit market. Both exporting and importing states must work together to fulfill these obligations, and they must take this obligation seriously, not just as a matter of legal commitment, but also as a policy, a moral, practical consideration with respect to saving lives and ensuring stability of states. These obligations, as I said, aim to achieve responsible arms transfers by promoting transparency and accountability in the global arms trade, as well as to foster cooperation and build confidence and trust among states and between states that import and export conventional arms. To this end, the ATT is not a disarmament treaty. It is far from it. And I think we all need to be making this point at every opportunity, because it is a widespread misperception around the ATT among many countries that this will disarm them. They will be impaired in their ability to self-defend. Rather, the ATT is a treaty that regulates international trade in conventional arms. Regulation doesn't mean preventing acquisition. It simply means that it is properly regulated within legitimate channels, and that only constituted authority may acquire these weapons, because they are weapons diversions, but let's begin with where the weapons are first acquired and how. As such, becoming a state party to the ATT will indicate your government's commitment to international cooperation against the responsible international trade in arms. Ratifying and implementing the ATT will also boost confidence among existing and potential overseas aid, development cooperation partners, and donors. This is why so many African countries have signed up to the treaty, and that's an important consideration for some of our countries. Africa has 28 states parties and 12 signatory states to the ATT, and 14 states that are not yet parties to the treaty. This shows that just over half of the total number of African countries consider their membership as important as their security and development. That's still a number short of quite a lot of important states, and we want to have 100% membership within Africa. But for various reasons, some of which I've listed above, this has not happened, but we'll continue work towards that. And I'm grateful for the work that you do at Control Arms to spread the message across. Many African countries have previously put in place regionally binding conventions covering small arms and light weapons, and with many similar obligations as the ATT, including the Nairobi Protocol, the SADC Protocol, but the most famous being the ECOWAS Convention, which is probably the most effective, frankly. So the existing regional small arms and light weapon instruments should facilitate the process of ratifying and implementing the ATT, as it is not starting from scratch scenario. So you can see why West Africa has done so well with respect to membership. All the conventions that the ECOWAS has been very effective in mobilizing states to take the further steps of joining international treaty organizations like the ATT. In turn, ratification and implementation of the ATT can also serve to facilitate further ratifications and implementation of regional small arms and light weapons convention, or at least complement existing steps taken vis-a-vis such conventions.
He's frozen. Ambassador Gaberi, it seems that your screen has frozen. I'm not sure if you can now hear us, but thanks very much for Ambassador Gaberi. I will interrupt you there. Thanks very much for setting out such a comprehensive picture for us. And I know that if we can move on, I know that time is against us, but thanks for really setting out such a comprehensive picture of the work that you did and where things are at in Africa. I know that you really, last year and all the work that you did, you really laid the foundations for the success that we're now seeing and for the future success in Africa. So thanks very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. And if we can now move on to my colleague Raluca, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now I have the pleasure of moving on to my colleague Raluca, who I wish to sincerely thank for joining us from New York at what is a horribly early hour of the morning. Raluca is going to set out to really build on what Ambassador Gaberi has already set out on the progress on ATT universalisation in Africa and the experience of Control Arms on promoting the treaty in this region. Raluca, I hope that you have a large cup of coffee at hand, and over to you. Raluca, are you ready? Raluca, would you prefer that? I think we'll bring in Fahad Ahmed at this stage, who is, as I said at the beginning, is the legal advisor at the International Committee of the Red Cross, and who has recently arrived in Geneva from Addis Ababa. Fahad may be a newcomer to Geneva, but he brings extensive knowledge and experience on the ATT, and given his former posting, is well placed to speak on universalisation in Africa. Fahad, a warm welcome to Geneva, and over to you.
Thank you, Inwai, and thank you, Ambassador Gaberi, for giving such an excellent presentation. So, honorable ambassadors, respected members from ministries and embassies of member states, office bearers of the African Union, regional mechanisms, regional economic communities, and United Nations, members of civil society organization, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Control Arms for inviting the International Committee of the Red Cross to speak on the universalization of the ATT in Africa. It goes without saying that the Arms Trade Treaty is a vital tool in addressing violence and strengthening international and human security. State parties have committed to subjecting the international transfer of conventional weapons, ammunition, parts, and components to strict criteria aimed at ensuring respect for international humanitarian law and human rights law. Yet, all too often, there is an apparent tension between these commitments and actual practice. State parties must follow the letter of the ATT and act in accordance with this humanitarian purpose. For states that have not yet ratified the treaty, I would like to underline the importance of dialogue to do three things. First of them would be promote the understanding of the ATT's objectives. Second, to dispel any misconceptions that may have cropped up about the ATT. And the third is to highlight the treaty's benefits. I was supposed to highlight the benefits of the treaties, but I think Ambassador Gaberi has done a very good job. So what I'm going to do now is to move on to the next slide and show what the ICRC can do to support states in the ratification and the national implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty. The first thing that the ICRC has been doing for some time and would continue to do so is to organize regional meetings. One of the examples is the work that I used to do when I was based in Addis Ababa as the ICRC's legal advisor to the African Union. I would work very closely with the Silencing the Guns unit and the DDR SSR unit in forwarding the Silencing the Guns initiative of the African Union. The ICRC delegation in Nairobi is also organizing an IHL implementation session for East Africa in May of this year, which is in next month, where there will be focus on the promotion and universalization of weapons-related treaties, including the ATT. The second aspect is working on bilateral drafting workshops. Now, obviously, these bilateral drafting workshops are upon the request of states who seek support on drafting new legislation, implementing new legislation, and also at times amending the legislation that's already in place. Ambassador Geberi presented that this was a challenge that came up. So ICRC stands ready to support states upon their request to set up these bilateral drafting workshops. Obviously, there are times when the ICRC engages in bilateral confidential dialogue with the authorities, with states, whenever there is any confusion, and to dispel some of these confusions in a bilateral confidential safe space. Upon the request, there's also possibility for the ICRC to organize meetings and briefings with the national IHL committees and ministries, whether they be finance to look at financial implication, whether they be militaries. The ICRC has a group of military advisors that would also work with militaries to dispel any doubts. And I put the support of the Regional Legal Advisors Network, which is based in all different parts of Africa, to support states in national implementation, ratification of the ATT. I'm going to take you through some of the tools that the ICRC has drafted, which might help you in your internal advocacy with your ministries, and also allow you to present the ATT in a manner that would be easily understandable to different ministries. Obviously, not all ministries have the same level of understanding as the MOD on some of these treaties. So these tools would be very useful. Next slide, please. The four tools that I'm going to present today is a fact sheet, a practical guide, a protection of civilians through ATT, and understanding the ATT from a humanitarian perspective. The first one, next slide, please, is a fact sheet, which provides the summary of the ATT and points out avenues for support in accession, ratification, and national implementation of the treaty. I use this quite a lot because it's a short document that can be used for advocacy, presented to ministries, and also has various other resources in it, which can be looked at. So for example, the UN has provided some very good resources on ATT, and of course on the ATT Secretariat's page as well. Next slide, please. The second one is the practical guide, which provides guidance on and indicators for assessing the risks of arms transfer being used to violate IHL or human rights law. The one that's on now is the protecting civilians through the ATT. It's a short guidance. It's a leaflet which describes the humanitarian rationale for the Arms Trade Treaty and its main commitments. Next slide, please. The last one is understanding the Arms Trade Treaty from a humanitarian perspective. Now, this publication provides an overview of the ATT's background, its object and purpose, and its main requirements. It presents and explains the ATT's major elements and offers the ICRC's recommendations regarding the implementation of those provisions of the treaty that are most relevant to achieving its humanitarian purpose. Last slide, please. So I hope that you will find the tools that the ICRC has developed useful. My colleagues and I stand ready to support you in the ratification and implementation of the ATT and other IHL treaties. Please feel free to write to me on this email address, or feel free to get in touch with an ICRC delegation in your country for any support. And we are at your disposal to provide that. Thanks, Invay.
Thanks very much, Fahad. And I think that's really, and thanks very much for outlining the important support that the ICRC can provide. And I can see it's really an excellent range of tools, from legislative assistance, to outlining what are the practical benefits of the ATT, to, the document that you have on the humanitarian perspective. And as always, the ICRC is a key partner in the universalisation and implementation of the ATT. So thanks very much to you. And now I go back to Raluca. Raluca, are you ready now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, for giving me this opportunity to highlight the work of Control Arms and its members in Africa. And thank you to my fellow panelists and participants for agreeing to join this important discussion. And I apologize for my earlier mishap. Technology decided to fail me 20 seconds before I was to speak. As Ambassador Guibert mentioned in his remarks, the continent of Africa has been highly and disproportionately impacted by the poorly regulated arms trade for decades. Currently, Liberia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and Northern Mozambique are some of the countries experiencing prolonged conflict, proxy wars, and intercommunal strife, while the Sahel and the Lake Chad Basin regions are faced with the threat of violent extremism and terrorism. The universalization of the ATT and its effective implementation provide the framework for addressing the unregulated flow of arms in Africa and their circulation within the continent. Yet to date, as Ambassador Guibert mentioned, only half of African countries are party to the ATT. Control Arms members in the region have served as long-standing partners to many African governments and have played a critical role for the treaty's universalization. Their clear commitment was demonstrated to advocacy campaigns, research, and capacity building programs, which contributed to raising the profile of the ATT in the region and connecting the treaty to regional specific goals and security concerns. And I would like to illustrate some of these efforts, and I will start with advocacy. Following the adoption of the ATT in 2013, Control Arms launched the well-known now Race to 50 campaign, which sought to reach the first 50 states needed to trigger the treaty's entry into force. Then, 100 days prior to the fourth conference of state parties, we launched the Sprint to 100 states. These universalization campaigns, and perhaps this is a less well-known element of the campaigns, which took place online on social media, but they were complemented by sustained outreach at the national and regional level, undertook by members such as my colleague Eugene, who will speak later in this event. And Control Arms members in Cameroon, in Mozambique, in Botswana work closely with their governments to identify obstacles to joining the treaty and to find ways to confront them. They facilitated meetings with governments in the region, organized seminars and workshops with parliamentarians, and conducted important follow-up advocacy. This was the case, for example, in Guinea-Bissau, where Control Arms member Parliamentarians for Global Action, an international network of legislators, which work to mobilize parliaments to advocate for human rights and the rule of law, paved the way for the ratification of the ATT by the General Assembly in July 2018. And these two big campaigns, the Race to 50 and the Sprint to 100, were successfully reached in 14 December 2018, when Mozambique became the 100th state party to the treaty. Now, this work on advocacy is often complemented by research and analysis conducted by Control Arms members in Africa, from research on key drivers of armed violence and insecurity, including the proliferation of armed groups, the links between small arms proliferation and youth radicalization, gender-based violence, arms diversion, terrorism, are some of the key topics that Control Arms members looked into and used these to advocate for the treaty's role in addressing these challenges in their regions. The Control Arms members have also partnered with governments to strengthen their capacity and to increase technical expertise among ATT stakeholders. And for instance, the Control Arms ATT Academy programs provide in-depth and tailored learning opportunities to government officials and civil society on the ground to support their engagement with the treaty. And with funding support from UNSCAR and the Voluntary Trust Fund, Control Arms was able to organize 2 such ATT Academy programs in Africa, one in Eastern Horn of Africa, and another in partnership with the Namibian government for Southern African states. But Control Arms members are also engaged in, for instance, government security sector reform efforts, capacity building and training of security personnel and stockpile management, arms marking, border security, and gender-based violence, all of which paved the way for the universalization and especially for the implementation of the treaty. Yet, despite these efforts, there are a number of challenges that remain or slow progress towards treaty universalization in the region. And a 2016 study conducted by Control Arms on achieving ATT universalization in Africa identified 6 key challenges. And all of these were already covered by Ambassador Gibere, and these are lack of political prioritization, lack of capacity, technical and procedural challenges, reticence, and crises. And to these, I would add perhaps language barriers, high turnover of officials, and more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic, which delayed progress in a number of countries to join the treaty. But the study that we conducted in 2016 also pointed to the need for tailored research and engagement to address national and regional challenges to treaty universality. And this premise informs subsequent work that we undertook in the region, from the ATT Academy programs to, for instance, research reports, which focused on exploring the role of the ATT in addressing wildlife poaching or armed violence in pastoralist communities, issues that are, for example, of interest to countries in the Horn of Africa. It is also imperative that ATT stakeholders learn from the countries that have already ratified the treaty and adapt these lessons learned to their national and regional circumstances. So for instance, Control Arms members in Cameroon, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Zambia have prioritized raising awareness of the treaty's benefits to relevant government stakeholders, including the executive branch and the parliament, in order to secure subsequent support for the domestic ATT ratification process, Another important lesson is the role of international assistance. A number of Control Arms members were able to succeed in their advocacy work on the ATT because of the support they received through international multilateral assistance programs such as the VTF or UNSCAR. However, international assistance need to go beyond what can be provided through the VTF, for example, because civil society organizations, while they play a significant role in their own right supporting ATT implementation around the world, they cannot apply for VTF funding independently. They need to secure a partnership with the government. And one of the last points I want to make is that it's important to note that all stakeholders need to engage in sustained outreach at the national and at the regional level in order to advance the treaty's universalization in the region. Only through the varied perspectives that different stakeholders can provide, including the ATT Secretariat, state parties, regional organizations, and civil society, can we address the many concerns that remain among the states that have not yet joined the treaty. And we can identify comprehensive and practical solutions to these challenges, and we can provide tailored assistance. And as we continue this work, we should also remember that while universalization is important, it is universal compliance that is critical to the objectives of the treaty. Robust implementation of the treaty. A robust implementation of the treaty and strict observance of all of the legal obligations are vital. And with this, I conclude. Thank you for your attention.
Raluca, sorry about that interruption, but thanks very much for setting out the the ongoing work that Control Arms is doing in Africa, and the extensive support that has been provided there, and also for elaborating on what are some of the challenges to ATT universalization. So thanks very much. Now I'm just I'm not quite sure if we have all panelists here. I know that next we were going to turn to the experience of Cameroon in joining the ATT, both from the perspective of government and from the civil society perspective. I'm just checking, Eugene, I know that you are there, but is also your collaborator, Mr. Medi, there?
Yeah, thank you, Hin. I can see Mr. Lasconi is there, but what I see my name appearing on him. Probably because I shared my link with him. He was having difficulties logging in, so I shared my link with him. So it looks like when he logged in, it is my name on.
It looks like it's
so
you logged in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Medi, can you hear us? And I hand over to you. No, he has gone off. So
yeah, Eugene, it looks like he's gone off. Yeah.
Eugene, let's turn to you to speak about what's the role of civil society and the support that civil society provided in Cameroon's ratification of the Arms Trade Treaty. And let's hope that we get Mr. Medi back. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hin. I was going to be very brief, knowing that the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Lasconi, was going to talk and probably was going to elaborate more on the collaboration with the civil society. But that said, I represent the Cameroon Youth and Students Forum for Peace, CAMYUSFOP, and CAMYUSFOP has been existing for 22 years, created in 1999, but got engaged in arms control in 2001, especially with the adoption of the UN Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons. So we got involved and started working with the state of Cameroon and engaging other member states, especially in Central Africa, on the universalization and implementation of key arms instruments, of course, starting with the UN Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, other instruments, including the Firearms Protocol, the Kinshasa Convention on Small Arms in Central Africa, and so on and so forth. Now, I wish to note that CAMYUSFOP didn't just come to the limelight on the Arms Trade Treaty only after the adoption, but we have been involved. We have been one of the key CSOs that have been involved in generating momentum on the adoption of the ATT. I could remember in 2005 when I was incorporated into a steering committee on the, drafting key policies on the Arms Trade Treaty. Yeah, that said, our collaboration with the government of Cameroon has been very excellent, like I said. And of course, getting the government of Cameroon to ratify the treaty, it went so fast. I mean, but thanks to the support of Control Arms, because in 2015, we received this support financial, this grant from the Swiss Foreign Ministry, which was facilitated by Control Arms. And this, of course, was the starting point of engaging the state of Cameroon. And then in 2016, we submitted, alongside in partnership with the government of Cameroon, a proposal for the VTF on the universalization of the ATT in Cameroon. and good enough, this grant went through. So through these two projects or grants, we were able to engage various entities involved in the ATT, starting by building the capacities of executive officers of key ministries in Cameroon, also building the capacity of parliamentarians, and then also strengthening the capacity of the civil society and journalists. Journalists were very key because we needed the media. We needed the media to make a lot of noise around the ratification of this treaty. And we also needed parliamentarians because the bill had to be submitted to Parliament for adoption. And so we were able to bring together all the stakeholders in separate meetings, separate events to build their capacities. But above all, we published a document known as a Manual on the Universalization and Implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty in Cameroon. And of course, this was a guide that facilitated or provided, the necessary, frameworks and what it takes to ratify a treaty. And of course, like I say, this guide could be used anywhere in Africa, so it could be adapted anywhere. Our ratification process went very fast. And of course, our involvement became a best practice. It became a best practice because when we got the grant, the VTF grant, before we finished the implementation of the VTF grant in 2018, Cameroon had ratified. Cameroon ratified in June. But we completed the project in November. So this was, in fact, a best practice. And I could remember during the first committee in October, the ATT Secretariat invited me for a site event in New York to share our best practice of fast tracking, of engaging a member state in fast tracking the ratification of the ATT. So this is a best practice I would like to share. But then about implementation, I think the government has also collaborated with us in implementation, and they always seek our advices, our expert advice on what to do. And Cameroon, immediately after ratification, benefited from the Expertise France project. And we were able to facilitate, to help in preparing the initial and the annual reports that were submitted. Again, in 2021, December, we received a small grant from Control Arms. And this grant permitted us to organize a consultation to look at where we are in the implementation and perspectives on how Cameroon wants to go in terms of implementing the ATT. So those are some of the things we've done in the implementation. And this month and next month, we have quite a number of arms control meetings and workshops that we are doing in partnership with government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And of course, they may not be basically on the ATT, but I know there's one we'll be doing a consultation in line with the BMS. You must also note that small arms and light weapons is category 8 of the ATT, of the arms in the ATT. So I think this also has to do with that. Apart from that, we've worked with the state of Cameroon, and we're trying to push to make sure that a national commission on small arms and light weapons, or a national commission on arms control in general, is established, and also working towards seeing how an action plan on arms control is also adopted in Cameroon. Now, what will be my perspectives? My perspectives will be, like I said, our relationship with the government of Cameroon has been excellent. And I wish other African countries and other countries globally could emulate this kind of excellent relationship between a government, a state, and the civil society. Our manual on the universalization of the ATT will be applicable anywhere in Africa, and it just needs to be adapted to the context. And so therefore those states that are still in the process of ratifying, so we could give a helping hand to them in terms of facilitating things with them with a guide like the one we published. I wish more events like these ones, either visual or in person, are organized such that experiences are shared. When experiences are shared, states that have not ratified, they may be motivated from those experiences. Like the ATT with other initiatives, such as in Africa, I hope in Africa, and I wish we should be able to link the ATT with other initiatives in Africa. For example, Silence the Guns, the Africa Amnesty Month on voluntary handing over of weapons. These are projects we have been involved at the continental level and also involved, as an implementing partner for the government of Cameroon. So I wish the ATT could be linked to such initiatives. And above all, Control Arms should be working towards engaging African Union organs such as ECOSOC. ECOSOC is the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council of the AU, which is the civil society organ of the AU. And ECOSOC Secretariat is hosted by the government of Zambia, based in Lusaka. So the Secretariat is in Lusaka. So we should be able to engage ECOSOC and be able to do such events, not only virtual, but maybe during the CSP. Why not do an event in partnership with ECOSOC so that ECOSOC could take the lead in mobilizing civil society organizations in Africa, in engaging their state parties or engaging their states on the universalization of the ATT. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Eugene. And thanks, really for setting out the excellent collaboration between civil society and the government in Cameroon. And please, give our sincere thanks to Mr. Medi, who seems to be unable to join us, but, we certainly hope to have him on at another moment. So I now hand over to my partner here, who's been helping me to keep time, etc. I have the pleasure of giving the floor to Lieutenant Colonel Ronald Kuchipanga. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Annie. Good morning, distinguished delegates. It has been a pleasure listening to your presentations. Firstly, I would like to thank Control Arms for giving me the opportunity to address the delegates on the progress that Malawi has made this far in treaty ratification. Yeah, for the record, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Ronald Kuchipanga. I work as a legal advisor in the Malawi Defense Force. When I came here in February, 3 months ago, I made an undertaking that I will approach the Malawi Defense Force High Command and other relevant authorities to start the process of ratifying the Arms Trade Treaty, as we have not done so, although we signed the same in 2013. I'm pleased to inform the delegates that the authorities gave a note in that the Malawi Defense Force, as a key stakeholder, through the Ministry of Defense, requested the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who are charged with this responsibility of ratification, to start the process. Following this request, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs started this process by calling for a stakeholders meeting, which is yet to take place. The support that Malawi will need is twofold. Firstly, we need some funds for us to facilitate registration in the ratification phase, and that will mean that will mean funds to facilitate stakeholders meeting and the other capacity building, including sensitization to the relevant authorities. Secondly, we need funds and expertise for capacity building post ratification, and if we are to effectively fulfill the treaty's obligations. This can be in form of training of key personnel who will be involved in the submission of annual reports and other relevant documents. I would like to state that the speech by Eugene was so motivating, such that I'll ask Hai to link up me with you so that you get that manual, which you said can be applied universally, so long as it is modified to suit the context. So I would very much love not to have just the manual, but also to meet you, to collaborate with you so that we can borrow some leaf from what you have, from your experiences. And lastly, I would like to thank Control Arms for showing support to necessitate that Malawi joins the Arms Treaty family as soon as practicable. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel, and my big thanks for your sticking to time. That's much appreciated. Now, as many of you may recall, at last year's CSP7, the Gambia announced that it was in the process of joining the ATT. I now have the honour to give the floor to the Permanent Secretary, Her Excellency Rahib Batai, to speak on the progress of the Gambia towards becoming an ATT state party. Over to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, and Henny, and I want to thank Control Arms for the invitation to this virtual meeting. As far as the Gambia is concerned, as you have rightly mentioned, my minister was here last year, and he made mention of my president acceding to the ATT. Since then, we had some obstacles though, because we had our presidential elections in December, and we just have our National Assembly elections as well. And most of these members are new. So right now we are on the verge of presenting the cabinet paper to cabinet for approval. And then from there, we'll follow up with National Assembly for the ratification. But before that is done, we will definitely need to meet with the National Assembly members and then develop their capacity. They need capacity building to know exactly what ATT is about, so that at least when we present the paper, it will pass easily. Fortunately for the Gambia, we have our Select Committee on Defense that would be very helpful to train. And then, you know, awareness creation is another aspect that is very important for us to do. We have civil society that we can work with, but then, you know, involving all the relevant stakeholders would be very, very relevant. And we are working on all this, and all this will require funds for sure. But as I can assure you, for now, we're in the process. The CP is already done by my ministry to be presented to cabinet as soon as we have our new cabinet member, you know, put in place. Cabinet is going to change for sure because it's after the presidential elections. But then we will definitely continue to follow up and ensure that the ATT protocols are followed. We already have the Commission on Small Arms and Light Weapons. And then Defense is the chair, the co-chair, together with Interior. And that shows that we're really interested in, you know, anything that contributes to global peace, because we are part of the world. So anything that would promote peace and stability in this world, we are very much interested to be part of. So we'll continue for sure to make sure that we ratify the ATT protocols as soon as possible, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. You know, and I can really appreciate that with elections, it's, you know, it's been a chaotic time and much going on, but, you know, it does sound like, you know, excellent progress is being made. And I really wish you all the very best for moving ahead. Now, I think I saw Mr. Medi pop up once again. Mr. Medi, are you there and are you able to speak? Mr. Medi, can you hear me?
Good morning, everybody.
Great. Thanks very much. Over to you.
You are listening to me.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Medi, we can hear you, and you can speak now.
Hello. Yes, good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Mr. Medi? Well, unfortunately not everything goes to plan, and I think that this might be one of those moments. I am really sorry. I think this might be a connection that is proving too difficult, and it is a great pity because we certainly would have loved to have heard about joining the ATT from the government perspective for Cameroon. But I really hope that this is something we can do at another time. And please, Eugene, pass on my sincere apologies to your colleague, and we will certainly be inviting him again. So the chat function has been on fire, and I've seen many comments and questions and much sharing of resources. So thanks everybody for such a lively input and for such an interesting discussion. We're out of time, and I know that we now stand between people going off and having lunch and then joining the ATT working group, which gets underway at 1 o'clock today. So at this point, I really wish to sincerely thank all of the speakers this morning for making the time and effort to share their experiences, insights, and lessons learned on universalising the ATT. Clearly, there remains much to be done in Africa, but what is also apparent is that there is a willing and active community of governments, regional organisations and civil society working together to realise the objectives of the ATT. This Thursday, 28 April, the ATT Working Group on Treaty Universalisation will convene, and I hope to see everyone there in person or online. It now remains to me to thank everyone once again who has joined this morning. Thanks very much to everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Over and out.